Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today with my impressions on The Surge 2 after almost 10 hours. We sadly did not reach that sacred number for our impressions video. I had a very busy weekend, so I did not have a lot of free time to put into The Surge 2, but I'd like to give you guys a bit of a backstory that I think will properly lead into how I'm feeling about this game. So, as most of you know, I'm reviewing Greedfall and Borderlands 3. I'm wrapping up both of my first playthroughs for these games, and I received a code 5 days in advance for The Surge 2. When I saw it, I was really pumped up because I haven't really got a very early review code in quite some time, but I also weighed out, do people want the Surge 2 content from me? On top of that, I'm in the middle of 2 reviews. So I decided, okay, I'll play the game for a couple hours and deliver my impressions. But that's not how things went. Quickly, I was hooked into the gameplay loop for the Surge 2, and I keep going back to this game, ignoring Borderlands 3 and Greedfall. Now, that's not to say I'm going to think this game is better than both of them, but this game is awesome for its gameplay loop, and that's what we're really going to be focusing on in this video. Now, a brief update on the story. It's non-intrusive and delivered in a fashion that you'd sort of expect with these Soul-style games. So, a lot of underlying environmental clues if you're paying attention. There are audio logs littered about the game world. There's a lot of lore that you can read if you are interested, and I always thought that the Surge had a very interesting world, sort of controlled by these humans and mechs essentially, and it goes a lot deeper than that, but that's sort of the baseline of all of it. It's designed to advance technology, but it sort of backfired on everybody, so you're in this semi-post-apocalyptic situation. And in the Surge 2, you're in a city called Jericho City. It's a lot more open than the previous Surge title, and on top of that, there's a lot of interconnection that I really appreciated, given that Dark Souls 1 is my favorite of the entire Dark Souls series, and that feeling of opening a door and seeing a location from the early game and how the whole world is connected together is really fantastic. Now, the Surge 2 is going to have loading screens, and there are going to be separate hub areas for the locations you're exploring, but those hubs are really well designed for the most part. There was only a couple of times I've gotten lost in about my 8 hours of playing. But let's focus on this gameplay loop, because that's what the majority of this video is going to be about, since it's really what has me continuing to play this game. What's so special about it? Well, we kill so many enemies in video games constantly. You're shooting them, you're slashing them, you're fighting them, whatever you want to put in there. You're doing something to an enemy, you're knocking them out, they're dropping loot. And we've seen that tried and true method for years, decades even. And the Surge 2 does something brand new that I personally have not seen before. So the way that the Surge 2 works when it comes to looting is you can target different body parts on your enemy. So let's say you see a nice piece of armor on their legs. You can target that and start hitting away at it. There will be an armor meter on said body part. Now, you can do special combos to weaken armor, and if you do that combo and you break the armor part, eventually, with each successive hit landing, you'll build up on the bottom of the screen a battery meter. Once this battery meter has a bar full and you have the armor destroyed, you can hold square when the enemy's health is low enough and chop off that body part. Now, dismemberment is cool and quite underutilized in a number of titles. I'm looking at you, Call of Duty. It's been a while since World at War, and I mean, World War II had a little bit of it. But anyway, you dismember that body part, and then you loot it. So what happens in this game is when you actually see the enemy running at you with a sick weapon in their hand, you can go, I want that. Target their right arm, break it down, and then chop it off and take the weapon for yourself. After that, you'll get schematics, which you can then take to your lab station where you're able to build it, upgrade it with parts that are collected from all those dismembered parts. So dismemberment is the name of the game. You can get crafting materials from cutting off the same part of that item that you want multiple times. So if you see another enemy with that same weapon that you already have built, you can cut off their arm again, and then you'll have another construction part for it to upgrade it and make that part that you already have better. Really, really good gameplay system in a nutshell. But it goes beyond that. The battery system is flexible because then you have implants. And for example, I have a healing implant. So when you're building a battery, I can either spend it to dismember and loot, or you know what? We're really deep into this run. We haven't gotten to a lab station yet. There's a good chance I may die. I'm gonna have to heal here instead of dismembering. So you have to consciously decide to pass on looting. And the amount of times I've gotten greedy and said, no, I'm looting, I'm trusting my own talent, I'm gonna keep going, and I still died, has happened a number of times, and I can guarantee you will all be on the receiving end if you dive into the Surge too. So there's that give and take of healing, looting in the battery system. There's also that Bloodborne-esque trade-off because you can't just generate battery by sitting back, you generate it by landing attacks, which means if you're low on health and you're like, man, I need to heal, if you don't have any of those healing charges stored away, which you can do, if let's say you have 3 bars of your battery full and you go, okay, I'm not going to be using these now, my health is full, you can store them for later up to 3, and it can continue to go beyond that charge amount as you upgrade that item. But once again, you're low on health and you're in the middle of a really intense boss fight, you need to heal up, you don't have those pre-charges ready, now you gotta charge in, hit that boss, build up your charge meter, heal yourself, and repeat that until your health is full, and then you can safely build up some pre-charges for later. It's a really great give and take system. Now, what about unarmored parts? Well, as you hit those, you deal naturally more damage to the enemy, which is the trade-off, but you're not going to get much loot and significant schematics or parts from the enemy if you're going to dismember parts that aren't armored. But like I said, you're going to kill them easier. So there's sometimes those moments where I mentioned earlier, you're low on health, you don't have any pre-charges, you run around the level, you're a little bit confused and worried. There's that mixture of anxiety and excitement, and you just go, you know what, I got to pass up on the loot here because I don't want to lose all my tech scrap, which is this game's currency. So I'm just going to target non-armored parts and kill them quick. But here's the other thing. There's a bar underneath the enemy's health. So as you continue to hit them, you build up what's called a enraged meter. Once that enraged meter is full, the enemy enters a second phase. And this second phase will leave them not being stunned as easily, not being knocked back as easily. So you can't just brute force your way through combat despite how flashy it can look in the Surge 2. Like I said, man, this is an excellent gameplay system that has its full hooks in me. It is pulling me away from 2 games that are very important to me, and Greedfall being one of my favorite games of the year. I think that's really, really impressive. So the gameplay loop there is good. I do have some minor complaints. There are audio bugs, so sometimes when I'm listening to audio logs or even just in cutscenes in general conversations with other NPCs, sometimes the sentence will end abruptly or the audio log will stop short. Really weird bug there. On top of that, just a little UI nitpick is that you have the health, the stamina, and the battery on the bottom middle of the screen. And this is the only Souls-style game where I've actually consistently not noticed that my stamina was low, because for me, it's so out of sight. You know, when it's on the top left corner or the top right corner, I feel it's a little bit easier to see. Maybe that's just me as a player. Maybe my eyes are more used to being fixated on the upper part of the screen rather than the lower part, but the upper part's where you're gonna see more action. So sometimes it is a little bit difficult to track that stuff, especially given that the bars are thin. But the good news is that the HUD is minimal, despite how reliant you are. For example, when you're targeting body parts, that type of stuff is very HUD dependent. So it's good that it's not intrusive, it's not crowded. But just keep in mind, I personally struggled a little bit with keeping an eye on the HUD. I did eventually adjust, but I feel like it took a lot longer than it should have. And that does bring me to all those gameplay systems that I just explained to you. They're excellent, but it hits you with them really, really fast. I mean, faster than most games. They really just drop it in your lap, which I think aids the game in a sense, because this is a, we'll call it Souls-styled game. So I think it's good that they just trust your intelligence, they trust your ability to learn, and they say, go on, enjoy, here's your mechanics. But at the same part, I feel even some of the toughest Soulsborne style games give you time to learn the mechanics, just to be introduced to them. I mean, this game quickly, at a very rapid pace, hits you with horizontal attack, vertical attack, armored parts, unarmored parts, battery charging, healing, switching between all of that. But I think because it hits you with everything so fast, you're allowed to eventually uncover its depth, like being able to favorite multiple weapons. So you can switch them based off an enemy type, or switching between different implants mid-combat, one that slowly recharges 50% of your health, or one that does an immediate recharge, one that gives you a bonus on defense, one that protects you from poison, once again, enemy dependent. So I found myself swapping out more frequently than prior Soulsborne style games, my loadout, what I was using to counter a boss. It was still something that's a common theme in those games, but I felt I was interacting more with my character than before. Another complaint I do have is in the sense of navigation. Now, I know that these games are best built on not holding your hand and letting you discover the world for yourself, but sometimes I felt that the layout was confusing because there are moments where there's sheer brilliance on display and the map is interconnected beautifully, as I mentioned earlier, and then there's times where I'm just like, where am I? Where do you want me to go? I remember one distinct part where they said, come meet me back in the harbor. I was just finishing up one boss fight, and they sort of expect you to know how to navigate your way back there. Just a little gripe there. Another thing that did come to mind is the pacing, in a sense, because obviously the highlight, I feel, of these games is getting to that boss and overcoming it. But there was one point in the game where I beat what I'd say is a fairly tough boss, and then I immediately got hit by another boss 20 minutes later. And mind you, the subsequent boss wasn't the hardest guy to fight in the world. It wasn't this nail-biting fight. It did take me a couple of tries, and I think that's because I'm rusty. I haven't played a style of this game since, I think, Neo, actually, which I platinumed and put about 90 hours into. But I digress. I thought that they could have spread out these boss fights a little bit. Although it does fit the pacing of the story, I feel the gameplay did not match that quite right. But overall, these are gripes that I don't think will matter at the end of the day, because I've really enjoyed this game. Definitely more than I did with the first one, and I really can see myself continuing to play this, but I wanted to make sure I got my impressions out there for you guys, because I think it's very important that you're all aware about another game being published by Focus Home that seems to be really good. And I didn't even mention one other part of the combat system, which is the drones. These drones can shoot from far away, take out turrets. There's drones that can stun. So there's a whole nother layer of the gameplay there. There's seriously so much here in this game. And I'll just say this much. The story and the universe could be hit or miss. I think the universe is cool. I don't really care about the story though. But the gameplay loop is the bread and butter of this game. It is really fun because I've never seen a game that does dismemberment means loot, and it is a drastic change of pace from the first one, but I really like it because it gives the game a brutal, visceral feeling to it, and it makes combat constantly engaging and fun, and it brings those enemies in front of you to life. I mean, how many times have we fought someone and went, man, I want that weapon, and when they die, they don't drop it. In this game, you can target that body part, you can take that helmet, you can take that body piece on their back, and I personally adore that about the Surge 2. So right now, impressions are positive for the Surge 2. I'll see how this video does and if I want to produce a full video on the whole entire game. But if you do want to hear extended thoughts, Carrick and I will be talking about this game on the Ham Radio podcast this coming Sunday. So if you're looking for more of the Surge 2, that will be your place to go for a discussion for sure. I don't know about a full review. It once again depends on the interest you all show in today's video. So with that, I will conclude my impressions here. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Are you interested in the Surge 2? Fire away, ladies and gentlemen. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that as it fuels all the content I create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.